Hi everyone, I would like to welcome you to today's webinar, Advanced Vectoring, Variables Are Your Friend. IAUG is pleased to add this informative and educational webcast to our IAUG-sponsored technical webinar program. Before we begin, I would like to share a few tips for using the GoToWebinar during today's presentation. First, you can minimize your navigation bar by clicking the top arrow button. I encourage you to submit questions throughout the event via the question and answer box on your webinar toolbar. Our speakers will answer questions throughout the presentation. Lastly, a recording of this presentation will be available for download on the IUG website by the end of the day. And with that, I'd like to hand it over to our speaker, Mary Doran.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming. Welcome to Advanced Vectoring. Variables are your friend. My name is Mary Doran. I'm a lead telecom analyst and contact center specialist here in Danbury, Connecticut. I work for Cardis. We're a global relocation company. I've been doing contact center work for longer than I'd like to tell, so we'll just skip that part. And I did this presentation in Austin at the conference. I've done it a couple times before as well. So what we're going to do is we're going to step through and go over variables and vectors and the VDN variables. We're going to kind of go from the beginning and work on baby steps. And build on it as we go through the presentation. We'll then end with some loops and what I call setting and stuffing. It's some more advanced stuff you can do with your variables once you get comfortable. So if you have any questions as we go, just kind of shoot them out like Paige said, and she'll get them to me. I don't want to lose you in the beginning because we do kind of build on it as we go. So to start off with variables, what they're going to do, and the most important thing, is really they're going to allow you to create more flexible vectors. The next couple of slides you'll see are probably, stuff that you've gotten out of the Avaya documentation, everything, so I'm not going to read through it specifically. But the biggest thing is to create more flexible vectors. We here at Cardis, when I came 13 years ago, had several small contact centers, and all of those contact centers had their own vector sets, and each vector set contained about 12 vectors each. So if you're thinking about it and doing the math, I've got 100 different teams, and that's a lot of vectors to manage. So what we did is use these variables. It allowed me to condense down, so we're using one vector set of 12 vectors for all of the teams. So now if you have a vector set that works, there's no troubleshooting involved. It really just kind of works the way it works, and you can just adjust different announcements and different things based on the variables instead of in the vectors themselves. So we'll take a walk through all of that. This will be where all the magic happens. Variables and vectors tables. So the switch command here is change variables, pretty simple. And Avaya has given us so many now. We're up to, what did we say, 702 variables that we can use for all the different things. I certainly don't use that many, but I don't have that many different groups to divide up things. But once you get kind of rolling with it, you'll be able to see that there's a lot of different things that you can variabilize, so to speak. So what you'll do first is select a letter for your variable. And as we go through, you'll see that I make it logical. There's a lot of things in my brain I have to try and keep track of. So make your letter represent something meaningful to you. So we'll see one of the first things we'll cover off is business continuity. I use B for business continuity. So when I'm looking at the vectors later on, I know exactly what they are. The other sections in this table we'll kind of go through as we go. So description, you would put in the types. There are different types that we can have. We go through here. Again, your classic Avaya documentation. Local, is it specific to one call or is it going to be applied to all? Global, which is the one that we here at Cardis use more often. I apply it to many different teams, so it's going to be a global setting. The length of the digit string is going to become really important, as well as the start position when we start stuffing in variables later on. Assignment is going to be used right in our first demonstration of business continuity, so we'll see that. And then you can also set a variable access code. We'll cover that at the very end to show you where you can actually change the variables with just an access code instead of different ways of doing it. It gives you multiple options. So our first, like I said, is business continuity. This was our biggest problem. How do I change or shut down the call center when there's a fire drill or there's something and I'm not here and I need to, go out in the parking lot. Now I'm trapped out there and I don't have my laptop, and what do I do? So we looked to business continuity and the variables to be able to fix this problem. So you'll see B for business continuity. Like I said, keep it logical. It makes it a lot easier to remember later on. It's going to be a collect type, and you'll see it when we're in the vector. We're going to collect a digit to assign that business continuity state. The scope is going to be G for global. We're going to use it for all of our call centers. The length is 1 because it's only going to be 1 digit. That's what we're doing. Start is 1. Again, we're not stuffing, so it's going to be, you'll get it as we get in there. Assignment right now is 0 because that means everything is good, right? We're here to make everything happy. So here's our vector to set the business continuity. So how do we get it to work? So using the example of the office, having a delayed opening due to severe weather, or there's no one in the office to log in to a dummy agent to close the phones, which is what we were doing before. With business continuity variable, it's a simple 5-step process to close the phones and play an announcement. So first, we would dial in using this whatever VDN you would set up as a DID pointing to this vector. You'll then hear an announcement that this announcement prompts for a 6-digit barrier code so that not everybody has to, has access. You have to know your barrier code. Remember your barrier code. Ran into this problem actually at the conference right before my presentation, and I couldn't remember my barrier code because not only was I freaking out because I had to present in front of a bunch of people, but I had an office that was down and I needed to change the state. So I had to sit back and try and remember what that code was. So make it something simple for you to remember, obviously. Once you get past that, you'll get down and you'll hear another announcement that says, press whatever digit that you want B to be. So what we're going to do here is this is where we're collecting our 1 digit for the assignment of B, which is what we stated in the variable table. So whatever we enter, here we're looking for a 1 or a 0. This announcement is going to say something about press 1 for business continuity state or press 0 if, to go back to normal. So if you press 1, we're going to go to step 11. It plays your announcement. This I also highly recommend. This is the announcement that customers will hear when they're calling in. So, due to a facility emergency, whatever's going on. This will give you a heads up whether you remembered to record the announcement back or not. Speaking from personal experience, unfortunately, we had a fire drill and we forgot to re-record this announcement back to something else. So it stated something about a power outage, but remember to record your announcements back and you'll be all set. So then once everything is done and you're back to normal, you can call back in your DID number, change your state back to normal, and everything is fine. You don't need to be near a computer or a phone in order to activate your business continuity. So what does the vector look like that a customer is calling in? Oh, there's our business continuity and our return to normal. So this would be our business continuity vector, or just the normal call routing vector that includes the business continuity. We come in, check for our service hours, and I'm going to cover off service hours in a second, as well as a holiday table. But our next step would be to check for B. So again, this is what we just changed the assignment for in the previous one to business continuity. And if it's set to 1, then we're going to go to step 12 and play our business continuity announcement and disconnect. If everything is fine, we're just going to queue to the skill and life is going to go on as normal. So one note on service hours. Again, if people are not using service hours tables, I highly recommend to take the time to go through your vectors and change them from your standard, if day equals this, then time equals that, then go through. Once we did this, it was a lot easier to maintain the hours and change the hours. Take advantage of this time adjustment from location. We have multiple locations. Our location 1 is Eastern Time. Our location 2 is Central Time. So that can be all maintained in here, and you don't have to do special math. Our main core is here in Danbury. So before I had to do math in my head to figure out what the time zones were. So you can start your day 8:30 to 5. If you're a call center that works overnight, then you need to remember that Monday ends, obviously, and Tuesday begins, right? So your service hours table, if you were open from 5 o'clock at night till 5 o'clock in the morning, you'll need an entry on Monday that says from 5 to 23:59, and then starting on Tuesday from 0 to 5 in the morning. So that's just something to remember. You can overlap. And you can put multiple entries here. Obviously, there's 5 entries per day. So if you close for lunch or different things based on what day, then you can make those changes. The nice thing here is you've got the time adjustment for location is right there on the table screen. Holiday tables have been around for forever. We've been using them for a long time. So I think everybody probably knows how the holiday table works. One thing to keep in mind is we don't have that use time adjustment by location on the holiday table. So if you do have multiple locations, make sure on your VDN screen, and we'll see this later on, that you are using the VDN time zone for holiday vectoring. Otherwise, again, you're doing special math in your head to adjust for the holiday table, and you could do that as well, but it just made us easier for me. I have different VDNs for different locations based on dial plan, so it was easy enough for us to put the VDN time zone entry in there and kind of move on with that. So that's our introduction to the variable vectors. If there's no questions, Paige, we'll just continue rolling right on to VDNs.
Yep, no questions yet.
All right. So in the VDNs, this is where I said the variables kind of give you that flexibility. So you can use the same vector for multiple VDNs, and it keeps things easier to troubleshoot. At least in our world, it did. Avaya's used to only give us V1 through V5. They've now increased it to V9 in release 7, which was great, giving us more fields. That worked out great for me when I changed my dial plan from a 5-digit dial plan to E164. And so now my strings were much longer. And I was like, oh God, what am I going to do? But we were able to kind of squeeze it all in there. So you have 16 digits per line, and we can pass it. We'll cover off the passing of the value from the VDN to the vector makes it so you can change all of those settings and use the same vector set. The VDN override rules we're gonna spend some time on because VDN override is so important with the variables, and it's also something that took me forever to really understand. So for me, it was always that little yes, no, that I had no idea what it really meant. I just knew if I changed it from one to the other, sometimes things would work and sometimes things wouldn't work. So with the variables, because you are passing from one VDN to another, it's really important to get your override rules correct. So we'll spend a little time kind of hammering away on VDN override. So basically, what it does is it changes the active VDN. So the active VDN basically controls everything that's associated with that call. So if you think about it as it's all about yes and less about no, then it helped me, at least in my brain, to keep it all straight. So no is the default, but if you think about it as the VDN override is to think that the next VDN in line will ask the prior VDN, can I override you? So the entry in the VDN override field of the first VDN will give the answer. So in the example we're looking at here, the first VDN is the main VDN, and it has the override set to yes. And then the second VDN, which is customer service, will say, hey, main VDN, can I override you? Main is set to yes. So now customer service becomes in charge or becomes the active VDN. Then all of the information on the customer VDN will be applied to the call. So in here, the call came in, with any of the information that we had seen on the previous screen, and now the customer service VDN will override that. But if then the call gets from customer service into billing, and billing says, hey, customer service, can I override you? Customer service, which is always customer service and plays nice with everybody, right? Customer service says no. So billing's left out, customer service is still in charge and active. So even if a call gets answered in the billing VDN, the information from the customer service VDN is still applied to the call. So let's shake it up just a little bit. So in this example, again, the main VDN is set to no. The second customer service is, hey, main, can I override you? So main says no and remains in charge or active. And if the call is answered in customer service, all the information on the main VDN is still applied to the call. Then after customer service goes to billing, billing says, hey, customer service, can I override you? Customer service is set to yes. So even though main said no, customer service doesn't care and overrides it with their yes. And now billing is in charge. So the information from the billing VDN will be applied to the call. So let's take a look at some of the things that might be applied. So one of the most evident is the agent display. So what do you want the agents to see when the call gets to their phone? So if a call comes in to the main and routes to customer service, and customer service says, hey, main, can I override you? And here in this example, the main says no and remains in charge. So if the call's answered in customer service here, the agent will see the toll-free number on their display. But if the call continues to billing, and again, right, hey, customer service, can I override you? Customer service says yes, billing becomes active, and if it gets answered in billing, the agent will see billing on their phone. So far, so good. Timed after call work is another example of what would happen again here, right? So we've got the active here, timed after call work will be 20 seconds because the call comes in and then customer service asks the main says no, so after call work is going to override the timed after call work on customer service. One last example is also skills. So again, like we said, right? Hey, can I override you? No. So then the skill set that is going to, the skill that the call is going to queue to here is skill number 1, not skill number 3. So in our world, the calls kind of flow through and everything is pretty standard. So I leave the VDN override as no on the main, and that's where I set all of my VDN variables and things like that. One thing to keep in mind is if you're doing any prompting in your main VDN and you're putting VDN variables there, then you're going to want to set that VDN override to yes, because when it goes off to either place that it goes to, you're probably going to want a different VDN variable sets to be active. So always let the main get overridden when you're doing prompting, and you'll probably save yourself a lot of time troubleshooting in the back end. At least we spent a lot of time trying to troubleshoot that when it wasn't working and it was going places we had no idea why. So let's run in through a basic VDN variable example. So here's the VDN page everybody's aware of. We all have seen it 1,000 times. Page 1, standard setup. We're going to here allow VDN override to yes. And here is where we set up the magic. It's going to be using a shared vector, and we'll take a look at that when we in the next slide. But here we're going to define open announcement, holiday announcement, closed service table, and holiday table as V1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. These are the assignments that we're putting in. So for this VDN set, the open announcement is going to be this announcement. We can use another VDN set with the same vector routing and give it a different announcement, an open announcement. So you can use that same vector set for multiple things. So here's our basic vector, right? We're going to come in, wait 0 seconds, hearing silence, which for the longest time, right, we all put in just because Avaya said you had to, but nobody knew why. So I don't know if it even still applies, but I still use it. Back in the day, it was to, keep the announcement boards reset and give it time to process what it was doing. So old school, still do it. But there we go. So the call is going to come in. We're going to go to step 12 if our service hours are not in table V4. And our V4 was service table 1. So we're going to go out there. Are the hours there? Yes or no? If they're not, then we're closed, and we're going to disconnect after our announcement V3, which was our closed announcement. Same thing here. So now we're going to check the holiday table, V5, which again, right here is 2, and go to step 11 and disconnect after V2, which was our holiday announcement. V1, we're going to play our open announcement and then queue through what we would normally do. So service table, holiday table, here we go. So we can add subroutines. We did this, I started using subroutines when Avaya only gave us so many lines in a vector. So we had to, my vectors were getting very long because I was trying to check for so many different things. So using subroutines and loops, it allowed us to add essentially more vector steps to our original vector. Now we have a lot of different vector steps, so you wouldn't necessarily need to use a subroutine and loop. I still like to do it because to me it keeps it cleaner. I know that I'm using the same subroutine to check for time of day, business continuity, is anybody logged in? I'm using that same check for every single one of my teams. So if I use it as a subroutine, then I'm not troubleshooting a big long vector every time something might go wrong. I know that that subroutine works because I use it for every single team. So if I have one team that's having a problem, it's certainly not the vector because it's being used by multiple teams. So you'll see we're going to use the at step, we're going to send it out to another vector. Our return is going to bring it back, and then we can keep it going through on the main vector. So here you'll see, here's our main vector again. So whereas before we used here, we checked for service hours and holiday and everything else right in this one vector, we can keep it shorter, simple, and send it out. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to vector 1005 at step 1, unconditionally sending it out to do our check, which is here. Are we open? So we're going to do the same steps that we had in our other vector, all grouped together, but do it in this one place. So we'll check for service hours and holiday. We're even going to check for business continuity here. And if we pass all of these things, then we're going to return. Now the vector knows where it came from, so it's going to return it back to where it came from, which in here would be announcement V1, because that's the next step from the go to at step. So now we'll go through and we'll process the vector just like we would have if we weren't using that go to at. I've also used this go to at for some look ahead interflow things. So we're going and to a vector at step 12, or you can go to any step you want. And the return is always going to bring you back to the very next step after your go to at step. So one of my favorite, I know it sounds crazy, but one of my favorite uses was setting and stuffing. When we started here, when I started at Cardis, we had about 12 different things that we realized we could variabilize, and there were only 5 lines. So we needed to come up and play around with how are we going to be able to use all of these really cool variables with only 5 lines. So the setting and stuffing is where it really all comes into play. And once you realize you can do it, it's great. With my 11-digit dial plan now, I don't do it as much because you only have 16 lines. So I just had to devariabilize some things or do it slightly differently. So you have, now we have 9-digit strings and up to 16 digits. We'll pass that value to the vector, which is defined in the table that we looked at in the beginning. So here we are back to the change variable table that we saw from the very beginning. So what have we variabilized? We've done business continuity. And we've seen the VDNs. So what I'm showing you here is we did business continuity as a variable vector. So in here we can also do announcement close, which we had as a VDN, service table, free giveaway we'll cover off later on, announcement for the holiday, and you can see where I've, like I said, used the letters to my advantage. Business continuity, and C is announcement close. I know by looking at it what those letters mean. I use all collect, except for this one meeting here as a value. We'll cover that off. That's going to be an example of a vector variable that you can use with a feature access code. So you'll see there that there's a VV1. We'll cover that later on. The rest are all going to be collect. Our scopes are global or local. The business continuity is global. It's for every single call that's coming in. The announcement is going to be local. It's for whatever is coming in on that VDN set. Setting and stuffing, this is where the length and the start become very, very important. Business continuity is 1 and 1. We're assigning that as we did in the beginning. The announcement, our announcements are 7 digits long. So that's where the 7 comes into play. When we're going to go through the example, it's going to start in the first spot. The service table is 2 digits in length. And when we look at our example, it's going to start in the 8th spot. So let's take a look at it and it'll probably make it a little more sense. Here's our main VDN again. Looks just like we did before on the first page. Here's the third page. So again, here's make your descriptions. There's announcement open and service table, announcement holiday, and the holiday table. Here's an announcement closed, which we just put straight out. And our group voicemail extension. Again, we use E164 or 11 digits for our extensions. So by saying before, our open announcement was 7 digits in length and started in spot 1, and the tables are 2 digits and start in spot 8, we can see here that there we are, 7 digits starting in 1, 230, 3350, 2 digits starting at 801. Same thing with the holiday table. So those are the first 7, and then at 8 we start with 02. So we've stuffed those in there so we can use up the real estate that we have in the VDN variable table. So let's see what we can do and apply a lot of the stuff we have so far. By stuffing things in, we need to then tell the system where to look. So we're going to set those variables. So we're going to set O as V1. So telling the variable table that you need to look in V1 for the information for O. Same thing, D is in V1. So if it go out to the variable table, we know that D is 2 digits and starts in the second spot. So, and the same thing, we've got H, which is the holiday announcement, V2. So you're setting them, telling them where to go. Here is our loop. So we're going to go out, check for time of day. And here's our time of day. Are we open? We're checking it all, right? Service hours table and D. We've gone through all these before. Business continuity. I also add in if somebody is staffed. So staffed in third. Third is what I use for our meeting. So if somebody logs in as an agent with a meeting skill, then that'll close the floor down. I check to make sure that there's agents staffed in the team to begin with. If nobody's here, then we don't want the calls to queue. If all that passes, then we go back. And we come back right to the step after where we left, which is the opening announcement. So then we queue to the skill, and we can collect and announce digits for voicemail down here as we go through. Route to G, which is the group voicemail extension, if digits equaled 1. So then we're going to go, we've set G as V4. So we're going to go to V4 from the VDN page 3 screen and pull that announcement off and pull that extension out and then route to G. So this is where we can be very flexible on the VDNs to use all the same vector set and using different VDNs with all of that announcement put off there. One thing to remember that I didn't mention previously is when you leave vector routing for things like Rona, you need to reset the variables on the VDNs so that it doesn't carry through. Once it leaves out and comes back, you need to reset that on those VDNs because they almost become like the main VDN yet again. It doesn't carry it through. It doesn't know that, where it came from once it comes back. So keep that in mind. When you leave vector routing and come back, you have to reset your variables on the VDN. So troubleshooting. This becomes like really important when somebody calls and is like, why am I getting calls to this team? It doesn't make any sense. And you can kind of go through, do a list trace on the VDN or the vector. It's going to show you, especially if you're setting and stuffing, it'll show you exactly what variables it's inserted and where things go so that you'll know, oh, okay, the override is set incorrectly, so it's putting in the wrong skill set or something like that. List usage variables will tell you all the vectors that the variables are set in. So it can help you especially if you're going to change something. It's good to know where they are in how many vectors they're in or where they're at in each one of the vectors. List usage digit string became really important when you start to use VDN variables. Where before you probably used, list usage extension, and it would tell you every place in the system that extension was used. If you're putting the number on the VDN variable, then the system doesn't look at it as it's an extension. It's just a digit string on the back of those VDN variables. So use list usage digit string, and it'll include all of the VDN variables, and it can show you where that digit string is. It's not foolproof if you're looking for, an announcement number, and that announcement string is similar to what you may use in your dial plan for other VDNs, then, it's going to show you those because it's just really looking for a digit string. But it'll save you a lot in the end to know that that's where those VDN variables are being used. So now that we've covered off the basics, what are some of the other cool things that we can do for business case uses and things like that with our variables? Business continuity, obviously, for us was the biggest one. The other was, for me, was E164 conversion or replace agent extension. We, like I said, went from a 4-digit PIN for our agents when the calls were prompted to an 11-digit dial plan. So I couldn't expect my customers to enter an 11-digit extension when we prompted for a 4-digit PIN previously. So I needed some way to make sure that that 4-digit PIN still got to the agent when we prompted. So I used a collect. It's local for that vector set, for that VDN set, and the extension is 4 digits in length. So here we go. It's our standard vector that we've seen a bunch of times already during this session. What we're going to do here is come down, and I'm going to collect 4 digits after announcement O for R. So R was our replace agent extension. So we're going to prompt for that. I'm still going to check to make sure that it's a valid extension in the VRT. We only have a certain number of groups that prompt for those 4 digits. And if a person's moved off a team, I don't want to bother sending it. So if it's valid, I'm now going to set digits for R, which I just collected, these 4 digits, right? And I'm going to concatenate to the left with 1203, 205. By using this concatenate and setting the digits, I've now take my 4-digit PIN, slapped it at the end of my 203, 205, and it's now turned into my 11-digit agent ID, 1203, 205, 1234. So I'm going to route to those digits with coverage, and now that 4-digit PIN will route to my 11-digit agent ID. It saved a lot of time and aggravation for my customers when we did it this way. So that's one example. Another thing you can do is vector steps counts. Again, it's a collect, it's local. The example we're going to run through today is going to be using a 10 for the number of steps that we want to focus on. So that's why the length is 10. So, here it picks up again from what we've seen before. We come through, and in the earlier examples, you probably didn't pay attention because I didn't call it out directly, but we were repeating our announcement every 60 seconds that offered up voicemail. But if we didn't want to say every 60 seconds or wait this many times, we could actually say, I want to do it every 10th time instead of every 60 seconds. So we can use the variable to count the number of 6-second intervals and then play the announcement every 10th time. So as you can see here, we're using step count n. So we're going to set n at the top of the vector to 0. Then we're going to go through at this step, we're going to check and see, does step count, does it equal 10? Are we at 10 yet? If we're not, we're going to go through, we're going to take n and we're going to add 1 to it. And then we're going to go through again and say, okay, add 1, and every time we add 1, and it's going to come up to 10. If it comes up to 10, then we're going to send it down and send it off to voicemail directly, or give them the announcement to offer voicemail. Call count is another one that we can do. I call this the free giveaway. We kind of used it briefly on one of the things that we were doing. So again, collect, we did this as a global thing with one of our small groups, so that's why it became global. The length is 2, and we're going to assign it again to 10. Where are we? F. So yeah, so we're going to come in, and again, service hours, are we open? What this is going to do is essentially say how many calls are active in the VDN, or basically in queue on this VDN. So if they're greater than F, which we set to 10, then it's going to come down and it's going to queue to a different group, because only one group is doing the main call flow. If they get overwhelmed, we need it to go to a second group. So basically, this is what that's doing, going through and saying how many calls are active in the counted calls, and set it to F. Manager controls, another one for coverage. We have a cell phone that one of the groups uses, and instead of having one cell phone that they pass around from manager to manager, I wanted them to be able to change the number that the calls were going to straight away. Essentially, somebody forgot the cell phone at home, and so they couldn't pass it on, and they couldn't or forward it or do anything with it. So I wanted to give them ability to change it on the go. This is kind of like a business continuity setup, same thing. So so the manager can then set the values for whatever they want, right? So we're going to collect 7 digits after the announcement, which again is the security code. If they get it wrong, I'm just going to hang up. And then I'm going to allow them to put in the 12 digits for K. And K is going to be the number that the call routes to. I didn't give them a backup to play back the phone number that they put in. You can do that. It's a very long vector that's like 100 different steps. So I just told them to put it in and then test it. So, but it allows them to change that phone number without having to call me and say, Mayor, can you point this to this number instead, or different things like that. And then the last example would be the meeting. So this is, again, if you didn't have an agent ID that you wanted to log in, if you wanted to give them a different option, to give them a variable access code to change that value instead of logging in or even doing business continuity the other way. So this is set to M. It's set as a value because you're changing it by the feature access code. The feature access code does need to be set up on the feature access page at the end of all your feature access codes. So you again would get dial tone, enter the *99, which you set as your variable, and then change the value to whichever you wanted it to be. So again, just like business continuity, if we came in here and it looked for M to equal 1 instead of, like we did before, B equals 1, then it would send it to the fact that we're in a voicemail and go into a meeting. So, and that sums up everything we've got. Are there any questions, Paige?
So there are quite a few questions that kind of go back to the beginning when you started talking about all of this. So do you want me to start with kind of the more recent one, or?
That's an excellent question. Usually I cover them off during. So, well, I guess it's hard because I don't know what they are.
Well, we could go with the most recent question,
Okay.
and then once I send you the Q&A report after
Okay.
the presentation, we'll send that out to the attendees.
Okay, perfect.
So the most recent question is, can you explain why you would replace the agent extension?
That was for, we changed our dial plan. So before it was 4 digits. So in my call prompting, I prompt for 4 digits. And then our dial plan went to 11. We had a very old system. We were in CM3. We updated to CM7. And in doing so, we just kind of changed everything up. So I needed to adjust for that dial plan change. Hopefully that answers that question.
And then the question right before that was, explain RONA configuration with reset again.
Okay, so it's all about leaving vector processing. So if the call comes through and it queues up, and then you Rona, when it Ronas, it goes back out to a different VDN and comes back, essentially leaving vector processing. So when it comes back in, it doesn't have any of the information that that it left with. So it leaves, say, from the team VDN. The team VDN, in our case anyway, has collected all the information from the main, so it doesn't have any variable information on it because I'm using the stuff from the main. So when it goes out and comes back, you need to reset everything on your variables on that third page of your VDN. Another example would be adjunct route. So if you're going out to a, I use Interaction Center. So if you're going out to a CTI and coming back in again, then you need to make sure you reset those variables on that. Also, another big one would be cover from an agent. So you essentially went out, rang to that agent didn't answer, it comes back in. And on that cover VDN, you need to reset those variables. Hope that helps.
Let's see. And you might have already answered some of these, so sorry if I'm repeating.
That's okay.
Could you explain the differences between the ING for the scope and variables?
The difference between, what was that? Sorry.
It says the differences between the ING for the scope and variables. Maybe it says LNG.
The difference between scope and variables?
The LNG for the scope and variables.
Is that length, baby?
Perhaps.
I don't know that I'm understanding the question. Maybe after I see it, I can respond back.
For sure. And then, does VDN override apply to VDN or origin announcement also?
Yes. Yes, basically everything on that VDN page, that back page, well, even all of them actually, it will override that if your VDN override is incorrect. And if they'll get the slide deck, right? Or it's in the slide deck. It covers, so it's associated VDN name, tenant number, skills, VDN variables, VDN of origin announcement, return destination, VDN timed after call work, and BSR application.
Awesome. And then one more. So VDN override set to no on the first VDN only works for handoff to the next VDN, and a third handoff can override even if original said no.
Yes, that is correct.
Awesome. And then let me see if there's any more. Okay. Yeah, that's it.
All right. Thank you very much, everybody. I appreciate you attending.
Awesome. All right. So at this time, I'd like to thank Mary for taking the time to speak with us today and everyone else for attending the event. As a reminder, a copy of today's presentation will be available for download on the IUG website, probably within the next hour. As you exit the webcast, please complete the evaluation for today's event. Your feedback and input are important and appreciated as we further develop the webcast program. Thank you again for attending and enjoy the rest of your day.
Great. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Paige.
Thank you.